Hi, I'm orta therox, a developer designer working on the TypeScript team at Microsoft. If you like my videos, you can sponsor my work on GitHub sponsors. So I'm a pretty active reader of Twitter and occasionally will write. And I've been thinking a little bit about doing some deep dives on the interesting trends that I've seen lately. So this week, underscore O shell, or maybe OS hell, not really sure, went from being a pretty normal Twitter account with a few hundred followers to a few thousands, and only by posting a single tweet. That tweet is one that a lot of people disagreed with. It's this tweet. And this sort of thing happens pretty regularly. A month ago, it was the tweet of this tweet by Hey Stanford, which was, "What's stopping you from coding like this?" Which asks, well, why don't you work every day as shown by your GitHub contribution graph? And this is the real GitHub contribution graph. It's the graph for Fabian Potentier? Potentier? I'm not sure. He's French. It's hard to pronounce French names. And he's got a solid cadence of working every day on open source. He does interesting work in PHP on Symfony, and occasionally will run a tool that runs hundreds of commits in an instant, basically. And that's what accounts for such large numbers. And his pattern of work is actually not that dissimilar to mine, except that I don't have that 300 commits in a day every now and again. So my pattern is very different, as opposed to quite the similar colors. And so when I was thinking about this week's tweet, it really sort of hit a nerve for kind of two reasons in my head. One is that it punches down at people early in their careers, and the other is that it puts up gates for them to hurdle. So by exclaiming that, if you use a mouse, you must be a junior developer, the tweet kind of plays with this trope that only successful or experienced people do X. And this is generally a recipe for getting people who are successful or experienced, by whatever metric you choose. They realize that they need to offset the damage done by a tweet like that by replying or by quote tweeting and putting it into some sort of context. And programming is hard, and the onboarding years are extremely tough. It's pretty easy as someone experienced to actually imagine someone going through their sort of first year as a programmer. It's already intimidating trying to make a compiler do what you want and to understand so many concepts that are pretty foreign to normal human beings, and they're struggling, and then they see a tweet that just adds yet another thing that you don't know to the pile of things you already know that you don't know, and that it adds to their struggle. And I think what makes this tweet stand out, though, is that there's actually a solid element of truth to it, right? For the last 10 years, I have wrote multiple blog posts on how I have learned these different key commands and how they make me do a particular thing a little bit faster. I've run workshops teaching it to non-programmers, how to learn a key command, where to find them, what sort of key commands work across websites and operating systems. And I think there's a large amount of value in actually knowing key commands and not using the mouse for everything. But I think one of the key things here is that I try to teach this as a part of technical fluency, right? As a programmer, you are forced into technical fluency because you actually have to know these things under the hood in order to sort of be productive on your day-to-day job. For a lot of people using a computer on a day-to-day, they don't need to know the underlying sort of mechanics of how something works in order to be productive. And putting up gates like that is just not very positive for people. So I use a mouse pretty regularly. I have spent a large amount of my time memorizing and understanding the key command structure, but that doesn't stop me from using the mouse pretty regularly. And I'm probably a pretty good example of a relatively successful and experienced programmer. And I don't tie my ability to use a key command to my ability as a programmer. And I think that sort of disconnect there is something that just makes someone say, ugh, these things are not correct. Like calling someone a non-program, like a junior developer because they're not using key commands just doesn't feel right. Except I think the idea is like somewhat sound, right? Like this tweet could have been, rewritten with a completely different tone, and it could have worked out like as a helpful tool for lots of people. So, for example, what could have been like, imagine it was instead learning how to use key commands really helped me move from feeling like a junior developer to being experienced. Same energy, different tone, not gatekeeping. Although that's not a hot, spicy take, and that's the thing. The world is full of not hot, spicy takes, and ideally, Twitter is like full of not hot, spicy takes of people just sharing interesting stuff. And the thing that's interesting here is the way in which tweets like this go viral, right? Like, this tweet was from just a normal Twitter account ran by reasonably normal looking person who just had a tweet that like definitely came off of the wrong tone, and what changed is the amount of people dogpiling onto this tweet, right? Like there was thousands and thousands of people quote tweeting that tweet, which will put it in front of easily millions of other people, and like I think those people are the ones that should really be considering what they are doing when they basically amplify a tweet like this. Like, I can understand the need to try and contextualize it and to say like, well, this actually isn't true. But by putting it in front of other people, you are literally amplifying the entire thing that you're trying to avoid people to think about, or to avoid having them feel like that gate is something that they have to pass. And especially what makes it trickier is that like OSHL seems to really consider this tweet a mistake and wrote quite quickly that they consider this tweet a mistake. And yet, days later, people are still continually quote tweeting just the original tweet out of context and stating that like, this is a bad idea and nobody should be, thinking that this sort of gatekeeping is real. Unfortunately, Twitter doesn't have an edit button, and, there isn't a way to sort of annotate that a tweet is a mistake. And instead, what happens is, the author will mute it, the thread, and probably stop seeing notifications about it. The entire world will continue to dogpile on this poor person. They made a bad take. But the thing is, like, this isn't somebody that's continually done something in bad faith and has proven themselves again and again and again to be someone that is like actually worthy of some derision. The replies to this tweet from people that I follow are just like I would never want to hear messages like that sent to to anyone, let alone somebody that was just like basically had a bad take on the internet and is exposed to probably a lot of people that they look up to, returning fire in a way that's just like extremely, extremely over the top. And, people exploring Twitter as a medium will always make mistakes. And I think people need to have a more nuance when replying to bad hot takes, especially when it looks like it's from someone that you've never seen before. And especially if it comes from someone with only a few hundred Twitter followers. They're not serial bad takers at this point. And like doing like dogpiling on them doesn't necessarily help. Like, it makes you look cool in front of your friends because your friends will get to see those tweets if they use like twitter.com. But realistically, what you're doing is amplifying that tweet to your audience, and in exchange they're getting tons and tons of followers, and they're getting like a lot of incentives for doing it again. Not only as the original author got the incentives to doing it, but so do the people that now follow that person. And suddenly you just get this like explosion of more and more people just thinking that, hey, maybe if I just make a few bad hot takes, I get a solid amount of Twitter followers, and then I can just start doing normal takes. And like, it's just conceptually hurts the digital commons. And so I try to make a rule of thumb of just never using my like Twitter platform to sort of debunk hot takes in such a format. And so like here's my advice if you feel like you do need to do something like that. First one is never link back to the original tweet. Like, first of all, just don't make it easy for someone to go find it. Like if it's a bad take, let it be a bad take and let it just die in isolation. Never. I think the best answer is generally to reassure people in a way that it provides a counter argument, but never actually refers to the original point. So a good case for this might be, I use a mouse in all the time in programming, but I think there's value in learning key commands. Here's a bunch of links to a bunch of useful resources to sort of teach you some more, right? Like, do people need to know that what you were referring to is like some hot take that was a bad take, that's just not providing any value to the rest of like your followers? And I like to think of it, I like the Marie Kondo style of like, does tweeting this bring joy to the world? Like, is replying with like a sort of aggressive reply to a hot take actually making like everybody's lives a little bit better? If it's not, then like, I just think that like friction gets followers in the wrong way. And even if you're providing, good arguments for the right side, you're still providing fuel for that fire. And I don't think that's generally a good call. That was this month's weird Twitter memes. And you have a good one. Ciao.